In Terranigma, you play as Ark, who accidentally freezes everyone in his village after opening a mysterious box. Ark must then free the souls of Krista and venture to the outside world and revive all life there. Terranigma is an action RPG. Ark has a versatile skill set. All his basic attacks are modified by movement. Attacking while running provides a dashing stab. Jumping makes Ark do a spinning somersault, good for hitting airborne enemies. You have a block by using R, which is definitely worth using and one of the more forgotten abilities in Terranigma. Unfortunately, your skill set doesn't expand in terms of combat. Things do get a bit stale when you're spamming the same dashing attack for the entire game, as it's often your best solution. Certain abilities are good against certain enemies, such as the stab being good for more heavily armored enemies. For the most part, the ability to quickly get in, deal damage, and get out with the dash or jump dash attack is usually your best option. Terranigma does have some light platforming. It can be annoying as Ark maintains momentum while landing from running jumps, which can lead to sliding off ledges, which damages you. A lot of the tight ropes also have very small windows to actually get on them. This leads to taking damage just because you are a few pixels off of the appropriate spot, which is really frustrating. There's also magic in Terranigma, but it doesn't feel very fleshed out. To use magic, you need to collect Magirock throughout the world. Magirock can then be traded to the Magia shop for rings or pins which have special effects like healing Ark or unleashing a spell. It's totally possible and reasonable to never use magic in your playthrough of Terranigma. That being said, using magic at some key points will be extremely helpful and reduce a lot of headache. Once you enter Chapter 3, there are some elements of light city building. These are a bit strange because it's possible to fail them. If you make the wrong decisions, you can stall out town development. The very first decision you have to make is who to vote for in Lior. If you vote for Jean, the town will be able to develop to 100%. If you vote for Lush Lewis, the town will stall. Most of these decisions are pretty obvious and often the first choice, with things like teaching Mac to put hamburger patties in a bun instead of wrapping them with lettuce. Town development itself is totally optional and doesn't really yield any rewards, but they can be fun side quests to do to extend your playtime. Terranigma is a late-release Super Nintendo game and it uses the capabilities of the system very well. There are a lot of cutscenes that make great use of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7. Otherwise, the art direction and design is spot on. Areas like Evergreen and Sanctuary are just beautiful. Even the way the pause and inventory system is handled is really well done. After a certain point, that magic starts to fade and you do enter standard medieval castles and modern buildings. Very little technical problems were experienced, except inadvertently entering the box during a boss kill. The game did soft lock, so be aware of that. Being forced to repeat Liam's trial because of a technical problem is pretty brutal, although it's really only 7 to 10 minutes of actual gameplay. Terranigma is in an odd spot with difficulty. It's the kind of game where a single point of strength or a level up can be the difference between you dealing 1 to 2 damage to an enemy, or 3 to 5. Levels 17 through 20 actively demonstrate this in Sylvan Castle. All are using the same weapon, a silver pike. While you can beat Terranigma at a lower level, it becomes a monotonous chore to do so, suffering through gruelingly long battles where you're only dealing 1 damage and you're dead in a few hits is just not a fun experience. The way to alleviate this is by doing some grinding at certain points to maintain Ark's level. Thankfully, grinding can be very quick if done in the correct locations at the correct times. It can also be painful if you leave it too long and the current enemies just don't take that much damage. Ark's level will absolutely dictate the difficulty of Terranigma. It will often be the difference of a boss taking 5 minutes and a few healing items, or 20 minutes and your entire stockpile. If you spend the extra time to power level to anything really past 35, you will absolutely demolish everything in the game. Deaths in Terranigma aren't very punishing. You retain all your gems, experience, items you've gotten, dungeon progress, and you simply respawn at your last save point. This means that for some areas, like in Loren, you can save items and just fight until you drop, until you finally find what you need to progress without any risk of wearing yourself thin on other resources. In general, most encounters are not very difficult. A lot of them would be more classified as annoying. If you enter them at a reasonable level with healing items, you should be able to beat things on your first try fairly easily. Some of the more set-piece type encounters also feel very annoying. In Dragoon Castle, if you're spotted by the guards, you're thrown back to the entrance. This is incredibly annoying as often the guards will catch you from off-screen, which forces you to run all the way back to where you were for another attempt that's likely to end the same way. Mostly ignoring the town expansion side quests, Terranigma was completed in 11 hours, 43 minutes, and 6 seconds. Terranigma has amazing pacing in the beginning. The introductory towers are small in size, but introduce you to the major mechanics in the game without feeling needlessly long. Your first weapon, the Cry Spear, slowly regenerates Ark's health, which helps to maintain the pace by keeping you alive without having to return to Krista for a heal. The first 2 chapters, which are about 3 to 4 hours, are just great. As long as you're being vigilant with weapon upgrades and killing most enemies you see, and maybe a few extra via backtracking and getting lost, you should be able to deal reasonable damage to everything you come across. Early on, most of your weapon upgrades are provided to you via chests, so it should never be a limiting factor. Chapter 3 onwards, Terranigma really starts to drag its feet. The EXP curve ramps up and enemies just don't keep up the pace of the first 15 or so levels you'll get in chapters 1 and 2. Leveling takes longer, being forced to grind to be able to damage most enemies or suffer from incredibly long battles dealing 1 damage a hit is a chore. Grinding was done for about 2 hours to beat Bloody Mary with ease. The grinding location was not the most efficient, and this much may seem excessive, but it's worthwhile to do it. Otherwise, Bloody Mary can be a grossly inflated fight which you will have to repeat if you die. It's definitely worthwhile to grind in Loren and Sylvan Castle. Afterwards, the pacing becomes more appropriate, and as long as you continue to fight most enemies, you won't really need to grind, but it can be beneficial to do so. A final stretch of grinding was done in Dr. Baruga's laboratory. The rate you get EXP there is so much higher than anything else in the game. About 20 minutes spent grinding in this corridor will get you about 8 levels and let you destroy every non-boss enemy in the game in a single hit. The final stretch of gathering Starstones really is just the icing on the cake. It's boring and tedious when you're really just hurting for the finale. There are a lot of hidden extras in Terranigma. Unfortunately, a lot of them aren't really worth it. Hidden weapons and armors are often obsolete by the time you can find them. If they aren't immediately obsolete, they're often only useful for a brief period before being replaced by something better. No matter what, you're given the best weapons and armor in the game as part of your standard plot progression, so doing the optional content seems kinda pointless besides the satisfaction of finding everything. That really applies to the town expansions as well. They are almost entirely without reward. They are fairly involved and require lots of world traversal to get the items to bring to other towns. This results in larger towns with more in them, but really nothing meaningful. It can be cool to do them during a first playthrough just to see how the town expands, but for subsequent playthroughs, ignoring them is very reasonable and you just won't miss out on much. Terranigma has an amazing art direction, fantastic sound design, and enjoyable action RPG gameplay. It's just so unfortunate that the first 2 chapters get you hooked and are just paced amazingly well and have this magical charm about them. Then the next 2 just drag on, and they're often just really boring and seem like they've lost the magic. That makes Terranigma almost a great game. The forced grinding and lackluster second half drags it down to something that's still worth your time, but could have been something truly incredible. Terranigma gets recommended playing's most prestigious verdict of recommended.